Hello, hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to Pran Foundation's webinar, Real People, Real Stories. This month, we have been in a place where we have given mental health the importance that it deserves, it requires, and this entire month, where we celebrate the Mental Health Awareness Month, Pran Foundation has come up with a lot of engagement activities with the first responders, where we have had them come forward, share their feelings, share their stories with the I Want to Talk challenge. We have our first responders who've taken the time to actively, I'd rather say more actively than they're already doing, spread the message of mental health awareness. In these times of the pandemic, there is no two questions about how much more important mental health has become. And we would like to take this opportunity today with real people, real stories to talk about mental health and its importance in the various populations that, surround us. Uh, Once again, I would like to say that we're fortunate to have with us our first responders, definitely, but volunteers of the month who have month after month worked relentlessly and have put in their efforts day in, day out, time and again, and they've proven the mantle that has been handed over to them, the responsibility that they carry on their shoulders to help individuals in emotional distress. Thank you so much, all of you, for agreeing to do this webinar with us. I know that each one of you has had or has seen the effect of the pandemic in your own, uh, within your family. And I know that all of you have reeled with it. And I know I was just discussing and catching up with all of you about how you are. It makes me very happy to know that you're doing very well. But just a caution through the air that I know you've just gone through it, but safety very important. Uh, More than that, uh, safety, mental health, physical health, it's all a package that is going to take us through these times. And today, I want each one of you to start off with introducing yourselves. And then we're going to get talking to each one of you about a particular population that you're closely associated with and the mental health of this population. And we definitely love to hear your messages for each of these population, because we have different people associated with us, and then the audience that is going to listen to each one of you is way larger. So, with this, let us begin. I'm going to start with a round of introductions. So, let's begin with Namrata. Namrata, would you please introduce yourselves to everybody who's listening to us today?
Hi everybody, this is Advocate Namrata Mishra and I'm a proud Pran first responder. And thank you so much for giving me this platform to get to give my message to the community.
Thank you so much, Namrata. Let's go to Sasha.
Hi everyone, I'm Sasha Agarwal. I'm 18 years old and I'm an incoming freshman at Harvard University. I'm a first responder with Brown Foundation and I'm so grateful for everything that Brown has been doing and continues to do towards society.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Prajwal.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Priyadashi Prajwal, an intern doctor in Pune, and I'm also first responder with Pran. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Prajwal. Shivani.
Hey everyone, this is Advocate Shivani, practicing in Bombay, and I am very proud to say that I'm a part of Pran Foundation, who has this platform of helping people who are facing distress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Priyanka.
Hello, everybody. This is Priyanka, a very proud first responder, and thank you, Aliza and Pran, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. All right, let's get started, because I know that everybody who's listening to us would love to hear to everything that each one of you wants to say. So we're going to start in the same order. So my first question is for you, Namrata. Namrata, you closely do work with a lot of women who experience or undergo, domestic abuse, and survive domestic abuse, or have to live with it somehow. In your work with women who have faced domestic abuse, what would you say uh, are their feelings, and what is the experiences that each one of them has, especially with the pandemic? Most of them are stuck with the predators at home, and definitely they do find it very difficult to deal with it on a more regular basis because they're all locked within the same roof. And what is the message that you would like to give out to such individuals who are undergoing abuse, are undergoing stress, and are living with fear on a regular basis? So, what's your message for these individuals?
Thank you, Eliza, for asking this question from me. In my 18 years of practice of legal profession and working closely with the survivors of sexual abuse and or domestic abuse, I, have some points that I would like to share with all of you. And when it comes to our country, in India, according to the data, every third woman is a victim of domestic violence and domestic abuse. Whether she is educated or uneducated, she is rich or poor, or whether she is a working woman or housewife, everyone faces it. So this is an irony that the women face. And during this lockdown, the situation got worsened as these women were trapped with their abusers, and it was again just like a parallel pandemic. And when we talk about abuse, so generally abuse, whether it's physical or mental or emotional, sexual or visual or verbal, one thing is that it can have long lasting effects on the mental health of people. And trauma can affect how you feel about your own self and how you relate to others. And these women who were the victims of domestic violence, they had a greater risk of developing mental health conditions like anxiety, depression, post traumatic stress disorder, and in some cases there were drug abuses also. And it's when they were not taking any immediate medical intervention and any medical help, then their condition was worsened. And there were so many families, because most of them were married women, their children got affected when they were the mothers who were the victims and the survivors of abuse. They were not able to take care of their children and their children's health and their own health. So it was, many families had, broken, the children had faced broken childhood. And in India, okay, there is, I feel that there is lack of supportive, organizations that can support these kind of women who are survivors, and if they are facing any kind of mental health issues. So, very important for any woman who is suffering from, domestic violence is that immediately she should take medical, intervention. The mental health professionals will help her. And if she's been physically abused, then she should go to the doctor, and she should not forget to also call the police. She must dial 112. There's a national number of emergency. If you need to, if something happens to you, you can call this number, and the doctor and the police will help her to, in later when she tries to press charge against her abuser, then the police will, and this documentation will help her. There are many females who don't want to come out because they think that their family, they will have, people will say that, okay, she's a single woman, or she is the one, she is the one who just is affected by all these things. So they don't want to come out. And then there are not very good, what I have personally felt, that there are not very many mental health organizations also. Pran Foundation is the one that is helping the people in distress, but again, I feel that there are females who are not aware that whom they should approach. So I have some helpline numbers that I would like to share. And specifically in pandemic, this National Commission of Women have also started WhatsApp, help in distress. So any woman, you cannot go out obviously to the police to lodge any complaint of abuse and your domestic violence that you are facing. So they have shared a WhatsApp number, And in WhatsApp number, whatever you write to them, an SOS message to them, they will regard it as a police complaint and they will take immediate action. And the police are doing it also. And if time is permitted, then I can share those numbers. So the number is WhatsApp number is 72177 and you can file on online complaints via email also. And the email ID is NCW, that is National Commission of Women @nic.in. And there are some pan India women helpline numbers that any person who's facing any kind of abuse, a child or a woman, if they are facing such kind of abuse, then they should call this number immediately as a distress call. So one number is 1091, that's a national helpline number, and the other number is 181. 181 are one-stop, crime prevention centers. So they're like Sakhis, and they have all the doctors, the psychologists, and the lawyers and the police who can help the females. And if a female is feeling very, insecure in her own house because she has to share her house with her abuser, then this 181 numbers have accommodation also for those women. They can stay there and they can be safe. And another helpline number, that is Women Power Line in UP, is 1090. And lastly, my message to all the survivors of domestic abuse is that, trauma and abuse is never your fault. You should not suffer in silence. You just, open up, seek help, and live better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Namrata. I know we've discussed this in the past, and I know that you're very, 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 passionately involved in, helping, domestic abuse survivors. And every word that you said came out with equal passion. I have worked with a few NGOs that do work with, women in domestic abuse, and I totally agree to, everything that you've said. That it's not your fault, and yes, there can be a number of, mental health associated repercussions of, experiencing abuse, which do not only stop at the woman who's facing it, but also, the children. And then those children carry the marks of it, and then it keeps going on and on and on. So for all the women out there who are experiencing abuse, gather the strength, if not for yourselves, maybe for your child, because that's what they say, is that when it comes onto your child, I think every mother somehow tends to gather that strength. So this is a message from Namrata and from Pran Foundation in general. Thank you so much, Namrata, for sharing the resources with us. Yet again, if anybody wants to speak to us, even at Pran, we do have a helpline, and we would love to, hear you and, to help you out further. So you can also reach out to us. But Namrata, kudos to the work you're doing, and thank you so much for speaking with us about what they go through and how they can seek help. Thank you, Namrata. Now, I would like to move on to Sasha. So Sasha is a gap year student at Harvard University, and she's due to join the coming year to start her education at Harvard. So Sasha is one of the youngest first responders who had joined us, and I would actually want to take a minute, and I would want to really say that ever since you've joined, and it's almost close to an year, there has never been a time where because of the so many things that you're doing and your associations with the numerous organizations, have you ever not done something, or have you ever not been able to complete some work that was given to you at Pran? So your dedication, I think, is something that a lot of people look up to. And thank you so much, Sasha, for all the work that you're doing with Pran and also the numerous other organizations where you work. I know that you also have a lot of messages for young girls out there, and you do speak about menstrual hygiene, and you do speak about abuse, and you're a part of many such forums. So I want to give you this space to speak about the socio-cultural and environmental stressors, and how it affects or causes rather emotional dysregulation in young girls, and what are the resources that they can reach out to whenever experiencing any sort of stress, and trying to streamline the path they want to go to. And just before you start, I also want to say that young girls, or young boys also for that matter, can feel very lost at times. So I'm sure listening, or hearing you would really help them. So Sasha, over to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for all the work and all the opportunities Pran has given me so far. I'm so glad that I've been able to work in the capacity of a first responder. Speaking to answering your question about the different environmental and sociocultural factors, I feel like that's so relevant to talk about because we've seen so many studies, repeatedly demonstrating the increased incidence and predisposition of female adolescents to emotional dysregulation and mental health concerns as compared to their male counterparts. But when we discuss these disparities, it's absolutely imperative, I feel, to consider the whole host of sociocultural and environmental factors that come into these differences, right? They're inseparable with these differences. And now these factors can range from implicit biases in words that we exchange every day to tangible barriers in access to resources in more vulnerable communities. And it's so essential to kind of address all of these different things. So while, of course, I naturally can't cover the whole scope of the discussion because there's so many factors in a few minutes, I hope that I can introduce perhaps just a few examples that I've seen around myself every day. So since we're talking about teenagers, let's start at the very beginning. Let's start at the onset of puberty. So we know that the onset of puberty is a time that's where bodily changes manifest physically in many visible changes in young girls, and they also occur at different rates, at different ages, to different extents in young girls. And there are public societies, there are educational institutions that often berate young girls for how these changes manifest in their body, while it is a natural and very uncontrollable process, right? And this obviously adds to the emotional dysregulation caused by hormonal changes that are already occurring at a time like this. And so this is something that's very subtle and it's very implicit, but it does still have an impact. And so while educational institutions, for example, they have regulations and they have reasons to enforce these regulations, I think adults, and especially teachers that are interacting with adolescents on a daily basis, need to consider and weigh how they choose to convey certain messages to young girls that are already navigating a very complex rapid series of changes. And then, of course, I think it's definitely essential to kind of discuss social media, popular culture, a time when body images and societal standards of beauty are at an all-time high, and young girls even today are conditioned into believing that a large part of their self-esteem is associated perhaps with their perceived physical appearance, and so many of them have this pressure to adhere to the conventions of beauty and things like that. This can result in distorted body images, it can result in lowered self-esteem, it can even result in suicidal tendencies. So this is how I think small things and everyday decisions can kind of catapult into much greater impact. And of course, while these more implicit biases are trends that we see on a daily basis across socioeconomic strata, it is essential to pay specific emphasis to the barriers in access that especially vulnerable low-income communities might face. So I work specifically a great deal in the sphere of menstrual equity. So if we're speaking about menstrual equity, there are communities that have absolutely no knowledge or no information about how their bodily processes work. And to navigate these changes at a young age, to understand these changes without any fundamental understanding of the science behind it, can be extremely confusing, extremely difficult for young menstruators. And even if we move beyond that, the societal stigmas, the ostracization that is associated with menstruation in so many cultural communities, of course, adds to those lowered feelings of self-esteem. And even if we move beyond that, the lack of access to period products can often keep young menstruators back home from school, from work, and all of these things cannonball into mental health concerns as well. So yeah, I just want to say, given the immense scope of all of these positive factors, only a few of which I've been able to discuss right now. We need an equally vast scope of social participation when we're trying to combat these concerns, right? And this can range from gender empathy training for educators, just the proliferation of messages of gender empowerment and body positivity on social media or in your immediate community, and all of the organizations working tirelessly towards meeting resource gaps and disparities. And so it's essential to, I think, recognize these gender-based differences, and every stakeholder has a role to play. So if you're watching this as an individual, the first step that you can take towards combating these differences is literally just unlearning your implicit biases and helping the people around you do the same. And if you're a young girl that is facing these issues, one message that I do want to give you is there is this common notion that therapy is only for people that have diagnosable mental illnesses. That isn't true, right? Therapy is essentially your tool to lead an optimal life and to be at optimal health. So just a simple analogy would be you don't only need to work out and eat healthy when you're diagnosed with a physical illness, right? You do it anyway. And so you please feel free to access therapy, to access mental health resources, helplines in moments of distress, first responders like I and the other incredible individuals out here. Even if you're facing something that might not necessarily be diagnosable anxiety or depression, even if you're facing an instance of harassment, even if you're facing an instance of imposter syndrome, even if you're facing just an instance of discouragement or lower self-esteem or gender discrimination at school or in your immediate community, because we're here to help with all of that, and those are intrinsically tied to your mental health.
Thank you so much, Sasha. I don't think there was any better way to put out the message that you've had for the audience. I think that you've taken just a few minutes to incredibly kind of put together everything that you believe in so far. And young girls in the society today uh, do require a lot of navigation, and that comes because of the biases that we hold, like we were speaking. And as a society in general, I do believe that we have a lot to unlearn and relearn because as the times have moved forward and the number of resources that are available at our disposal today, I believe that we're not making the most of it. And I hope that with all your messages and the message that Pran has, people out there are ready to just pick up these things that are there at their disposal and use it in their best interest. And just make the most of it. So thank you so much, Sasha, for your message for all the young girls. Thank you. All right. Now that we have a message from Namrata and Sasha, we'd like to move to Prajwal. So, in his introduction, Prajwal did share with us that Prajwal is a trainee doctor in Pune in a hospital, and there are no two questions or no two thoughts about how incredibly difficult the last 1.5 year has been for frontline workers or healthcare workers in general. So, Prajwal, if you could put some light on how the last 1.5 years of the pandemic, or almost a little more than that, has been for people in the healthcare industry, and has it had any deteriorating effects on the mental health of individuals working day in and day out on the front line with the pandemic?
Hey, thank you for the question. I feel any problem, especially when unprecedented, brings humans anxiety. It's the most basic human emotions, and COVID-19 pandemic has been the most unprecedented and especially unimaginable situation. I've had the privilege of being at two ends of the spectrum. Back in 2020, when COVID was spreading, I was a final year MBBS student, and so most of the months were spent attending online classes, pursuing quarantine hobbies, etc. And fast forward to 2021, now that I have become doctor, I am living away from my family and have to attend duties every day, including Sundays. We have been posted in COVID ward, COVID ICUs, and there's no quarantine or lockdown for us as it is for other people. So it can become really gruesome. We love serving people. It's what we came in this profession for. But you know the situation as of now. Constantly seeing people dying, hearing negative news all around every day, and then a few days back, lack of oxygen, medical equipments, ventilators, beds. so it can be too much at once. Because families of a dying patient cannot be at the bedside, the nurses and healthcare workers try to arrange for video calls of patients with their family and offer emotional support. But it can become overwhelming for us because we can't be there for everyone. We don't even get enough sleep most of days. Some days we have to work for 24 straight hours with no proper time for meals. You remain working in the hospital and then a patient dies in front of you. That gives you a feeling of grief. Then in the public, when people don't wear masks and not take precautions, that gives you a sense of anger. And whole day long you worry about your family. Will they be safe in different city away from you? So it's a lot of mix of emotions at a single time. But here comes the part: how do we deal with this? I feel there's no single way to, not no single or specific measure in which we can come out of it. It has to be a bunch of actions and thought processes. After our duty hours, I try to do video calls with my family members much more often than I used to do previously. Spending an half an hour or so with your friends can really calm you down. Some hobbies in your breaks, or keeping your nutrition right, and some exercises may even help. There are ruptures in life and there are repairs. It's a kind of rhythm. But the healthcare professionals many a times don't get time for that. And when you don't give your body and mind what they want, then you have to pay a price for it. So it's important we keep our mental health right, because that plays a huge role in the deciding treatment for our patient. There could be Zoom based therapy sessions in which healthcare professionals share their experiences and which could potentially unfreeze the freeze emotions of their. We may feel down sometimes, we may feel to give up, but we can't give up because we have to be there for the patients. So it's high time that we have to destigmatize mental health and seeking help whenever we need, because it's essential to pay attention to our own emotions in order to take care of the emotions of others.
Thank you so much, Prajwal. Actually, first of all, I'd really like to thank you for the work that you're doing, and like every doctor, every nurse, every medical professional. I know that a lot of, us are doing a lot of things in the pandemic to reach out, but there is no parallel to the work that doctors and, the frontline workers in general, like apart from doctors also, are doing. Uh, of course, I think the way you started off, that when something unknown, or when something that is new comes up, it can bring in a range of emotions and it can throw us off balance. And I think with the pandemic, that has happened with us. Like we were discussing a few days ago at one of our huddles, that usually when children would face a problem, they would go to their parents and ask them what to do. But today we're in a place where even if you go to parents and ask them a question that, what should I do here, parents might not have an answer, because for them it's as new as it is for the child. So we are left in a world with fear, anxiety, and everything. And I think that has really increased our stress. It makes us feel overwhelmed, and the grief that surrounds all of this, it's really, really, really there are no words to explain how difficult it can get. So definitely self-care is very important. But on your behalf and the entire fraternity of doctors and frontline workers, I would like to send out a plea to everybody out there. If you want to help an entire fraternity of individuals to get out of the situation they're in, just follow the basic precautions and wear your masks. Go out only when it is necessary. It is your health, uh, and it is your safety that can safeguard the mental health and the physical health of the thousands of frontline workers who are working out there for us. Thank you, Prajwal, for sharing your message to all the doctors, to all the intern doctors, and all the medical staff who's working out there. It's a difficult time to probably follow self care, but it's the most important time that you follow self care. And Prajwal has given each one of you some tips. So we hope you follow it, and you're able to relieve a little bit of stress and emotions that you're feeling through it. Thank you so much, Prajwal. Coming now to Shivani. So, Shivani, you're an advocate yourselves, and decision making in general can be a very difficult process or a very difficult work in the life of individuals every day. But for judges and advocates, it's a lot more that decision making is involved, and every decision that you take comes with its own bag of stresses. So I want to know what is the effect of decision making, and how stressful is it for judges and for advocates to take decisions every day, and how do you cope with the stresses that come with dealing with the life of innocent people, or dealing with the life of people who have committed a crime, and how do you regulate your emotions when dealing with individuals at this level, and experiencing the stress on an everyday level?
Thank you, Anisa, for this question. Like Namrata ji said, she was focusing on the client part, the women part who have faced domestic abuse. There have been times where we have faced clients, like in divorce cases, majorly in custody cases where children are involved. When these clients come and approach the advocates, how do you cooperate with them? How do you listen to their thought process? They have their own stories, they have their own facts to tell. In such moments, those are the times where we feel helpless. How to console them? As we all know, law does not have emotions. It works on black and white, the rules, the laws which are put up. So we are trained to see things into black and white. There is no other color. There are no other emotions that enter into the court of law. So we have to abide by the rules and regulations, whatever is stipulated in the books. So at that time, we fail to understand how should we provide them a little helping hand or make them feel better while they are sharing their story. There are times where I have personally seen women coming and they cry a lot while they are sharing their stories. I have been a survivor, or I have been abused so many times, or I have a 2-year-old child to take care and my husband has left me stranded with no help. These are the times where it was very difficult initially. But now being a part of Pran Foundation and being an FR where we have been trained, at least I have felt it better. I find myself in a better position to understand what they feel and not only give them the legal advices from the point of view of law, but I can also make them feel better, console them, and make them at least, speak out what they want to, rather than there are times where we see clients are not sharing everything that we need. As a doctor and as a lawyer, a doctor and a lawyer would want to know your entire background before they could come to some conclusion to help you. And there are times where, if I am a client and I'm approaching a lawyer, I would not say things that I might have done wrong. But there are times where we have to gauge from their body language that there is something that is hiding. So, like we were trained to understand the body language, we could read something is missing out there, give them a little time to open up and speak. Though we are not a counselors by profession, we cannot counsel them, ki, okay, you can feel better, you can speak, but we need some information where that we need to speak out. So, when being a lawyer and not a mental warrior, we used to focus on facts. No, there is something that you've got to tell us. We are very upfront, and we might sometimes appear to be very rude to the clients that हमें ये information चाहिए. There is some missing link. Might affect their client's mental state. That this is what is there to the story. There is nothing more than this, and eventually they might feel that the advocates are very arrogant, not listening to what we are saying, but then asking questions one and the other. So after being a part of Pran, where I could understand the body language, where I could understand that there are underlying statements that they are not comfortable in sharing. So what I could do, what my personal experience has been, I have tried giving them a little comfort space where I could listen to what they have to say, what they feel, instead of instead of listening to everything, where I feel that there is certain thing that is missing a link. I keep questioning, what do you feel? What do you want? What do you think about particular scenario? How would you want to react in that particular situation? What do you want me to do about it? Even though it's a legal advice, I will provide you with a legal advice. But what is it that you want out of this case? Rather than giving, rather than me telling them you should do this, you should do that, blah blah blah. Instead, I want the client to tell me, what do you want out of this? Because we are all aware that cases when come to court, it keeps on going on for years and years. Uh, I don't want the families to be broken. If there are any chances that things could resolve, if you could settle it outside, not affect the children in future, like Namrata ji said, like Aliza, you also pointed out that the children will face the broken families. This trauma will end up with them until forever. So rather than going into that, give them a time, speak to them. What do you want? Many lawyers fail to do this. Even I am guilty of it. Before I joined Pran and I could know what people feel. It is we can try knowing what they feel. There are advocates who will end up saying, "Oh, ye kar lo. You have a right to do this. You have a right to do that. Blah 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 blah." All n number of advices, but we fail to see what they are going through. In that scenario, we ourselves have also become machine. We have stopped feeling because the court of law do not want us to enter with emotion. Like for doctors also it is said, you cannot befriend your patient, otherwise that will not bring practicality in your, if you're going to operate somebody who is in your family, your hands might be shaky. But if you are not knowing that patient, go with a practical approach and you might be successful. Same comes with the lawyer. If you go with emotion, your judgments would be cloudy. That is the reason why law speaks, there is no emotion. And many advocates have turned to be like this after years and years of practice. They have turned to be no emotions in the court. Of course, I agree, no emotions in the court, but it is not necessary to shun your emotions completely. Our profession demands arguments, debates, to be very on the point. We have to stay apprised with all the amendments that come into picture. We have to be very updated. Let's say, for example, a criminal case where a person is charged of a murder or of a rape. Famous example of Delhi rape case. Famous example of Kasab, the terrorist who has killed many of us. They were given a trial. There were many people who were thinking, कि इनको trial क्यों दिया जा रहा है? Why are we wasting funds of our country, protecting them, providing them for advocates and legal services? We fail to understand that I, being a victim, have the right, but they, as accused, also have equal right. He is a human, we are a human too. Our constitution, our legal fraternity believes even if 100 people, even if 100 guilty people will go off the strand, it is all right. But we focus that one innocent person should not be hanged to death. He should not be punished. He should not be convicted. So, based on this, there have been many high crimes. Why do we want to show leniency to them? But this is the moment where judges have to take a call and they have to make a decision stating you as a victim have a right, he also has a right to defend himself. Law is equal for everyone and everyone is equal before the law. You cannot say I'm a victim, usko फांसी पे चढ़ा दो because I have suffered. No, he needs a fair trial. And there are many pressure formed because of the people, because of the society. There is also parallel media trial that we see. Due to media, there are very much news spreading around. Many times it so happens that it is not covering the entire situation, and that also poses great difficulty while framing a judgment, because many people are biased towards something and many people take some decisions into anger, wherein we as lawyers, we as judges cannot do that. We have to go by certain laws that are put up. In this scenario, it causes a lot of pressure, it causes a lot of stress on the judges while they take decisions. There are certain threats to their life, to the lawyers who practice into criminal litigations. So all of this has ended up into creating stress to them. I have personally seen my seniors who are very fit and fine, but because of this building stress every day, some of them have succumbed to diabetes, some have got heart issues. So all of this has started taking toll on their health as well. Hence, that is why I feel that mental awareness is really needed in this legal strata. Like I said, I was also guilty of being a machine and not handling emotions or not treating clients with emotions. But after I joined Pran, I could understand, I could give them a certain platform where you could feel better, tell me out. I take breaks when I feel anxious, where there are times where I am confused as to what needs to be done. I am finding myself in an anxious state where I myself need breaks. So I know, I am conscious that I need to take a break. I need to take certain self-care points. If I'm not in a position to talk, I will reach out to others. I will reach out to my seniors, talk with them. Like Prajwal said, talking half hour with your parents, talking half hour with your friends will clear your mind. Take a break from it. You know there are certain self-care activities you can do. So this is why I really feel that it is important that legal fraternity should also be made aware of things like these. Mental health awareness is needed in the strata as well. So just a last message to everyone in the legal field that yes, we are not supposed to deal the matters with emotions, but we do not want to shun emotions completely. We do not want those practical aspects of argumentative nature, debating nature, suspicious mind to involve in our personal lives as well. So, to bring consciousness, to bring awareness, and to distinguish between these two professional and personal qualities, I really feel this is necessary to be imparted. Thank you, Aliza.
Thank you so much, Shivani. You actually did not only give us an insight to the current situation, but you were kind of able to relate and bring us to a point where we understood, the need of the mental health care within the system. With the number of examples you gave and the time you took, you were able to convince everybody that there is a great need for mental health advocacy, mental health care, mental health help that is required within this strata, and that can all come with awareness. And this call actually is a very good example because we have two advocates with us here, and it shows to us that how. As an entire system, each one of you does understand that this is the first, the initial, and the most basic step that is going to almost very positively guarantee good physical and mental health in the future and for a very long run, especially with the base that you've built to explain the entire thing. It makes absolute sense, and it also calls out the necessity for people to start paying more attention to the everyday stressors that can then become a part and can kind of cannonball into something that's much bigger and then deliver themselves as different physical health conditions. So thank you so much for speaking with us about that, Shivani. Towards the end of this session, last but not the least, like they always say, we'd like to come to Priyanka. So Priyanka, we're aware that um you are taking and you're using this opportunity that is presented to you to talk about therapy. So therapy is still a taboo. It is an area where it's a gray area where maybe not a lot of people would like to come and seek help, and it has had very negative repercussions on individuals who know that they need to take help but do not step forward to take help. So I would like to give you this place to speak about your experiences in therapy and how has it helped you in your everyday life. I know each one of us here have spoken about the importance of mental health, but the culmination comes when we're okay with seeking therapy. So I'll give the stage to you to speak about how and why therapy, in your opinion and understanding, is important and how it has benefited you.
Lisa, thank you once again. I will straight away start from my own personal experience how therapy has helped me overcome so many mental barriers. So it was a very difficult task for me. For like initially also I wasn't open to to talk to people, to share things with friends or family members or be it anybody. But slowly and gradually, what I understood is to overcome any barrier, to overcome any mental barrier, or to give time to yourself. The first thing is you should understand that yes, there is a need to seek help. This is what made me realize yes, I do need therapy. I do need someone who is ready to counsel me, and I do need someone who is ready to listen to me. When you reach out to people, generally, say, be it your friends or your family members or anybody in that front, so mental health is always shunned away. It is always said that it is only because of your overthinking. It is no such thing that mental health exists, or there is a depression or the anxiety, whatever you're feeling. It is only actually your overthinking and nothing more than that. It took me a lot of time to understand that it's okay to feel like that. And that is when I decided that yes, I should approach a therapist. I should start. I decided that yes, I need therapy. So my own personal experience has been like I can see a lot of difference of how I was before and how I am right now. I see a lot of positivity in my life. Not only, it is not an automatic process that once you start taking therapy or once you start taking counseling, things change like this automatically. No, it's a process. It's a slow process, and it takes time to heal from each and everything that you are willing to address it. So the first thing is you should seek help. That is what I did. And I feel very proud of myself today that I did seek help from my therapist and I did seek, counseling. That is like how my experience has been. The second part, when I speak about like how I always recommend people to take therapy is after joining the EFAIR training with Pran Foundation, it actually made me realize that always when you're approaching others also, or maybe when others approach you, my approach towards them has changed now. So initially, I used to, immediately react to others, opinions or the feelings or the emotions. It was like I used to get angry or I used to get anxious, but now the entire approach has actually changed. So now it is like I am much more observant. I am much more kind and humble. When people approach me, I try to listen to them because my own personal experience has taught, has left a very calm feeling within me that once you have someone who can listen to you, it actually, the healing process starts from there. When you feel, yes, you are being listened, you start healing from that time itself. And it's very, very important. So I started, following the same thing in bits and pieces though. Obviously, as said before, we are not trained counselors. But then after the EFED training also has taught us a lot, how to go about this. So it actually made me, to listen to people in a calmer way, in a humble way, to be kind to them, to listen to them. And even if you're not able to give that one stop solution for each and every problem, at least the other person can feel that yes, I did speak to someone, I did seek help from someone. There was a person, like there is a person whom I can reach out to. That is how I felt the difference after taking therapy and counseling. And when the same thing or the same response, I received, I feel so better at the end of the day. I feel like, yes, you need not make a big difference. It's very important to understand this that you need not make a very big difference, but even a small help, a small difference, or a small smile, if you can bring into anybody's life for that matter, be it your close friends or your family or anybody out there, it really makes you feel much better. And on a personal level, after I started volunteering, not only with Pran Foundation, I volunteer with different organizations as well. So I personally feel a very strong feeling that once you start helping others, that is when I started healing myself. And I can see that difference within me, within the approach that I make now. And not only towards others, I always, now prioritize myself. I prioritize my mental health. I know that yes, there is something that is going to break. Before it breaks, I know that I have to seek help. I know that I have a person to whom I can go to. I know that I can rely on someone. And I know that it's very important to speak, to seek help, and to communicate my thoughts and emotions. So, thank you, Aliza. That's all I have.
Thank you so much, Priyanka, for actually sharing your personal journey with therapy, and also spending time and explaining how seeking help and giving help are both a part of healing yourselves. So it's a two-way street, and thank you so much for speaking to us. With this, we come to an end of speaking with all our speakers. Each one of you has been able to represent the community that you come from, the community you belong, or the community you passionately feel about, and you've all been able to, I'm sure, communicate your thoughts about it. But just before we close, I would like each one of you to maybe just give out one message to individuals within your community who you've spoken about. There might be some individuals within this community who might be trying to seek mental health help, but because it's a taboo or because of the stigma, they might be stepping back. So, just one short message or one message that you would like to give to them to come forward and seek help. So, Namrata, women who are survivors of abuse and maybe are a little hesitant in seeking help, one message that you would like to give to them.
I would like to say to them that they should not feel scared about anything, and they should come forward, they should seek help, and they should not suffer in silence. Silence is not the solution to abuse. Taking a prudent step and action to prevent that abuse and to address that abuse is the right thing that you should do.
Thank you so much, Namrata. I'm sure that the women listening to you do feel empowered. Sasha, going to you for the young girls who might be experiencing, diff- battles every day, but are a little hesitant to seek help. What would you want to say to them?
I just want to say, struggle and abuse and trauma is never comparable. And whatever you're going through that's causing anxiety or discomfort in any form to you is valid, and it warrants your you should be able to seek help. You shouldn't hesitate from seeking help because you feel like your struggles aren't valid or they don't warrant professional help. So go ahead, seek help. It's one of the best investments you can make. It's not anything that you should be ashamed of. If anything, it's an act of courage. You just stepping forward and taking that step.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Prajwal, to the doctors who are, yes, very busy, but are in a time where they really, really need help, what would be your message to them?
Yeah, as I already said that pay attention to your emotions, mind and body, then only you can take care of emotions, mind and body of others.
Thank you so much, Prajwal. Shivani, to the the advocates, the judges who do take a lot of decisions and do undergo stress on an everyday basis as well. What would be your message to those who are not seeking help but are a little hesitant?
I would say to them, as the lawyers and judges are apprised and they stay upfront to learn the new amendments, I would tell them to try this something which is going to make you feel peaceful and calm.
Thank you so much, Shivani. Coming to you, Priyanka, in general, a message that you would like to give to anybody who is hesitant in seeking help.
Yes, Aliza. So I have, come across such people. My sincere request would be, speak out, talk about your emotions, share it with others, maybe like whomever it is. Don't stop yourself just because somebody else is going to think something about you. It is your life, things are in your control. Nobody else can take this away from you. So when you need help, please go, seek help, and speak about it. Communicate your thoughts and emotions. And yes, definitely, there is a way forward. Nothing, the society or what others think about you shouldn't stop you from being happy. That's very important.
Thank you so much, Priyanka. Towards the end of this session, I would just like to thank each one of you for spending the time with us here today and speaking your heart and speaking your soul almost to each and every community that really matters to you. Once again, to everybody watching, mental health is not something that affects one individual, affects one community. You could come from any and every strata of life. You could be in any walk or any phase of life. Mental health is something that always warrants or requires your attention. So be mindful, look out for yourselves, watch out for yourselves in terms of both your physical health given the times and your mental health at any and every time. Thank you so much for to all of you for coming ahead and spending time to speak with us. Thank you. I will see you around soon. Very very good work has come out of this month, and I hope we continue working this way in the future with the support that we have from each one of you and all the huge army of first responders working every day to spread the message. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye bye.